You know, when you learn the secrets to hitting your irons flush, it becomes really easy. You look forward to hitting that mid-iron out of the fairway because you know you're going to hit a good one, and most of your playing partners are going to struggle hitting those shots. Now, I've put together 3 of my all-time best videos that are going to share with you some of those real secrets to hitting crisp irons. Let's go ahead and get started. Okay, the chunk shot. Man, what a frustrating shot, especially out here today. Maybe the grass is a little bit damp, it's a little bit muddy here, and I know if I kind of stick this club down behind the golf ball, maybe I hit an inch behind the golf ball, that's just going to sink down into that mud. It's going to be a thud. It's not going to go any kind of distance at all, and I might even hit it into the water here. Well, how do we get that consistent contact to where we know we're going to come down and through every single time? Because what I see most players doing, they get a couple of those chunks, and now all of a sudden we say, okay, well, I don't want to do that again. That was bad. Let me kind of stand up and hit the ball thin or a little bit thin every single time. And you start to develop a pattern of hitting thin shots that don't feel solid. They're not really compressed. You hear some players and you think, man, that sounded different than what mine are sounding like. And that's very, very common. So we're going to talk about how to not only just get rid of the chunks, but to also not fall into the habit of getting a lot of thin shots. How to do the correct technique so you can hit them nice and clean. Let's go and get started. All right, so for the majority of this comes from an improper use of the lower body, so the legs and the hips. When that isn't working right, and I'll be honest with you, when every golfer first starts to play golf, the lower body, the legs, the hips really aren't going to work correctly. So whenever we start to learn, we can get into this bad pattern, and then we start to make adjustments and compensations from there. So let me go ahead and give you the overall, what I see a lot when this is happening. So if I'm not using my legs very much, let's say I set up this golf ball and my legs are turned off. I'm not really rotating my body very much. I'll tend to pick up the club with my hands and arms, like we see with a lot of players, and not make very much of a shoulder turn. That's what happens when my legs aren't really working on the way back. And then if my legs aren't working on that way through, I'm going to use this upper body again to try to hit the golf ball, to push that club on through, and my follow through is going to be a little bit more bent forward instead of nice and tall and high here with the body like we see with the pros. So you notice if I stay bent forward like this, my hips haven't really rotated around, whereas if I get my rotation all the way on through, now I'm good and tall, and this is pretty much what you'll see all the pro players doing in their follow through. So when we don't use the legs, we get a shot that looks something like this. Here's the legs turned off again. So we miss some power. If we do hit one good, like that one happened to be fairly solid on the club face, it doesn't have a lot of distance. I'm probably 20 yards short of the green or so there. So whenever that happens, and we're using all those hands and arms, it's very easy to start to realize we're going to chunk quite a few. If my lower body isn't helping to shallow out my angle of attack, I'm basically just relying on my hands and arms to accurately judge where I'm going to stick this club in the ground, either too heavy or too thin. So as I start to hit some heavy ones, I say, okay, I'm still not going to use my lower body, but how do I keep from chunking this? I might start to raise up out of the shot. So as I back up, and I think a lot of you guys can probably relate to this, as I start to back up out, my chest moves back here, I get farther away from the ground. Again, not using the lower body, but now I'm still using my hands and arms, and I'm going to tend to hit a lot of these thin. That's going to look something like this, and you've probably seen this quite a bit, where I kind of back out, and I hit it thin, and now all of a sudden, I kind of top one, and it kind of rolls across the ground there. Or maybe I just hit it fractionally thin, and it ends up being a decent shot. So the root cause there is I didn't use my lower body. That got me using all hands and arms. That was very inconsistent. I had a lot of chunk shots. So I start to realize I got to do something about this, and now I'm going to start to stand up. The real key to this is learning how to use the knees and the legs properly, get those sequence really good. I'm going to give you a great step-by-step drill to make that happen, and then we're really going to take control of these chunks and thins. All right, so now let's go through a progression to learn how to use this body correctly. Now, the first thing is, in the backswing, I want to make sure that I go ahead and rotate my hips on the way back. If I don't get very much of a hip turn, again, I'm going to pick it up all hands and arms, and I'm going to bring it down all hands and arms too. So I got to make sure that I let those hips rotate. And the way I like to think of this is, if you kind of imagine kind of getting yourself in a short stop, your legs are bent, your knees are kind of out. As I want to turn this way, my right leg is going to straighten slightly, and my left leg is going to come barely in, and that's going to allow me to rotate my hips quite a bit. Now as I start my downswing, I'm going to go back to that kind of short stop position again. So this will be the top of my backswing. I start out in the short stop type position. I go to the top, my right leg straightens, my left knee comes slightly in there, and that's going to allow me to rotate to the top. As I start down, that's what's going to be going back to that kind of knee bent, knees wide. I'm very athletic, I can pivot on through there, and that's going to allow me to get loaded up into the ground. Now as I come on through the shot, what I want to do is my finish, I'm gonna let those legs extend and rotate all the way around. Now the big key here is I wanna feel like my hips and my pelvis come up and around at the same time. I'm gonna exaggerate here so you can see this. This would be my backswing, start of my downswing, and then coming on through. Now it's really exaggerated. I'm just kind of giving you a visual so you can really see that. There's the downswing and then coming on around. And what that allows me to do is to get some momentum as I'm pivoting with my body. So imagine I had one of those big medicine balls, fairly light one, maybe 10, 15 pounds, and I'm gonna swing that back and through. I gotta load up these legs, get them ready and loaded into the ground. That way when I drive on through, I can help that to pivot that bag around. What I wouldn't do is just kind of lock my legs in there, keep them bent, and do this. I wouldn't be using my lower body. I have to get that momentum and that pivot from my lower body happening. Once I can do that, now my hips will rotate all the way on around here to the finish. My right heel comes all the way up off the ground. And if you're not if you're kind of limited in your hip, I have a great test for you on this. Put your left foot up directly in front of your body and try to rotate in your left ankle this way. So that would be what's called internal rotation of the hip. If I can't do this move, then that means that my hips can't rotate on around while keeping my foot forward. So if you have a tough time lifting up your leg and doing this, rotating that foot inward, then you're gonna need to flare that left foot out like that so that you can rotate on through in your golf swing. So I'm using those legs, I'm getting athletic, I'm bending and kind of going around my body. Do a good 15, 20 reps of that, just kind of swinging your arms back and through. Again, as you start the downswing, knees wide, bend them into the ground. As you come on through to the finish, everything facing the target, your belt buckle toward the target. My right foot is pivoted around, my chest is nice and high here. Everything's facing it just like you'd see with a PGA Tour player. Now grab another 15, 20 swings and start to get the momentum of that club. I'm going back, starting my downswing, and then coming all the way on around. Again, I just want to build this up, let my legs bend a little bit to start the downswing, and then rotate all the way on around through. Good 15, 20 reps. Really get the feeling of that sensation. Now with my body pivoting me around, again, I have some momentum of this club. I feel like I can just let this club swing back and through, and I'm gonna be able to fairly consistently time up where this is gonna hit the ground. I could even take it with just one arm, maybe my left arm here, and I can let my body and momentum of my body do the pivot, and you'll see how I'm hitting this grass fairly consistently every single swing. I didn't have one that was way back here and way up there. That's because the momentum was created with my body, and my arms were just kind of swinging with that momentum instead of my body being locked in concrete and my arms trying to do all the work and kind of thrash at it. So now let's put this to the test. We've done our 15 to 20 practice swings just with the lower body. We've done our 15 to 20 adding the lower body and the arm swing. Now let's go ahead and hit a couple shots and see if we can control that low point. And then I have a great drill for you to fine tune it after this. All right, so there we had the divot in front, nice clean contact. Let's go ahead and start to fine tune this now. And I have this alignment stick down on the ground. One thing that I really like to do is line that up with where you're gonna start the golf ball. So here I'm just kind of letting that point to where the golf ball is, and then I'm gonna see in relationship to that where my divot ends up happening. So here I can see if I hit this golf ball and my divot's way back here, I start to realize, okay, it's a couple inches back. So if I put this stick kind of pointing right at the golf ball, what I should see here is an ability to consistently have that divot in front, but also to have that divot fairly shallow. Notice how it's wet, it's muddy, but these divots aren't really deep. There's still roots of the turf are kind of popping up out of this. And again, what's happening there is what we call impact glide. And the reason is, as my hips are kind of loading into the ground, as they come up and in, that allows this club to come fairly shallow with the ground. So you imagine if my club's low to the ground, as my hips rotate up and in, that's kind of keeping that gliding across the turf. If I was to have my hips level and have them move that through with my hand, I would be hitting down into the ground. So it's the fact that my hips are moving up as my club is releasing that kind of allows this club to move down and then glide very level with the turf there. So take another alignment stick out again, work on that same drill, feel the knees separate, and then come on through to the good full finish. And I'm gonna pay attention to where my divot happens, and I'm gonna adjust on each shot for say 10 shots. If I'm a little far back, really try to get that farther forward. If I can even get too far forward and my divot starts up here, I need to bring it back a little bit. So I'm just getting some feedback so I know if I'm doing this correctly or not. There we go, right toward the flag. Nice shot, but just a little bit thin here. So again, I would just work on going ahead and allowing myself to hit a little bit more down. So don't be afraid if you're slightly off to adjust on these. Those little small adjustments will allow you to get a feel for where the ground is. If you put this stick there, I think you'll be surprised with how much more awareness you have and how after about 10 or 15 shots, you're gonna get some control over where that divot is happening. I find players a lot of times say, well, this is an advanced drill. I wanna fix my swing and then get to doing this drill. You don't wanna do that. This drill is gonna help you to fix your swing. It's gonna help you to improve your technique and help you to get the feedback that you need so that you can control your low point and control your divots. Best of luck. If you're hitting fat shots, the majority of the problem is coming from your weight shift. Now, most people I see get to the right way too late in the backswing, and then in turn, they get back to their left way too late, or even worse, they're falling to their right in their backswing. So I actually made this little device, and heads up, I'm not trying to sell you anything. This isn't even for sale. I just went to Home Depot and made this to kind of illustrate this point, and I'll go over exactly what I'm talking about here, but basically it's just a foot wide, 1/2 inch, 3/4 inch thick piece of oak, and then I put about 3/4 of an inch of a little piece in the middle that I screwed on there so that it's kind of like a teeter-totter and it'll go back and forth. I also put these foot pegs on there, which I'll get to here in a second, but I think this does a great job of illustrating the proper weight shift in the golf swing. Now, what I see most people do is if I start with the weight on the left, and this is what I want to be when I'm at impact. So if I'm gonna hit fat shots, a lot of times my weight would be on my right, and I'm grounding out behind this golf ball. Now, if I happen to miss the ground, I'm coming in so shallow, I might even be hitting up into the golf ball and I'll thin it. So not only are you gonna hit fat shots, but to add insult to injury, you're also gonna hit more thin shots if you do it that way. Where I see most people go wrong is if we start with our weight on the left side of this teeter-totter, what I see people do is they keep their weight left way too long, and then it's almost the end of the backswing or the start of the downswing before they get it to the right, and two things happen. Either you fall back and you never get it to left like we're talking about. That's the heavy and thin shots like we talked about there. Or you do get it to the right, and then it's so late in the downswing you really don't have time to get back to the left, and it feels like your arms and your body are completely out of sync, like your weight shift and your golf swing just aren't working at all. Well, here's the proper way to do that. I'm gonna start with my weight a little bit more on the left side just to show you when I'm shifting to the right. And what I'm actually gonna do is when I feel my weight start to shift is actually before the swing. You'll even notice if you pay attention to my left toe, it almost pops up off the ground a little bit before I make my backswing. So you'll see me as a trigger lift up my left toe, and that's when I'm getting my weight to start shifting to the right. So my weight is all the way to the right when I'm about here. So I almost feel like it goes to the right before I even start my swing, almost like I'm doing this and then starting my swing. So it goes right and then my backswing starts. Same thing in the downswing. I see players getting to the left way too late and completely out of sync. So I'm getting to the right early, and then I want to start shifting to the left about here. And that's what's going to allow me to hit crisp shots, get the divot in front of the golf ball. I'm going to have my weight shift to the left. As I'm starting my downswing, I should already have most of my weight on my left foot. And then I'm really pressing it into the ground. So in slow motion, it looks like this. A shift to the right, then I'm going to the left. My weight gets left, and then I swing down. So this teeter-totter back to the left actually begins about right here, and it ends with me feeling pressure in my left foot when I'm this early in my downswing. If I don't have my weight in my left foot at this point, when my left arm is parallel to the ground, everything else happens so fast that I can never catch up with it. So if you notice in these swings that I'm taking here, look how halfway in my backswing, or let's start with the beginning there. Very early in my backswing, I lift my left toe and my weight gets right. And then notice how about halfway in my backswing, my weight actually begins to stop shifting right and start shifting to the left. And once my left arm is parallel to the ground in the downswing, I already have a good amount of weight in the left. I feel a lot of pressure into my left foot. So long story short, here's the way you want to feel this. You want to feel like the teeter-totter goes to the right, Then you start your backswing. When your left arm gets parallel, you want to feel like the teeter-totter goes to the left, and then you're going to feel like you have all the pressure on the left side of this left side of the teeter-totter when your left arm is parallel to the ground in the downswing. That's going to set you up to where you can hit down and through this golf ball, get that divot in front every single time. Now there's a couple other drills that you can do with this to get the rhythm of this with or without this board. I'm going to do one with it and one without it. Now I put these rails on the side here to help me from sliding my hips. What I don't want to do, if this was a flat board, as I shift to the right, my foot would be kind of angled down, and I see a lot of people when they do that slide their hip way out here like this. I don't want that to happen. I want to have this angled in, so I'm shifting my weight, but you see that this right leg is staying angled in. I'm never doing this motion. Same thing with the left. I have that angled in to where when I get the weight there, I'm not sliding way out in front of it. I'm putting pressure there, but my hip never gets in front of my left ankle until all the way in the follow through. That's why those angled pieces are there. I can also do this where I feel like I get a weight shift to the right. Imagine that this is my impact. I get a weight shift to the right. I start left, and I want to feel like I put pressure in the board, and then the momentum of my hand is hitting through contact. That's going to look something like this. So I'm letting that teeter-totter get the momentum of my body moving left, that divot in front, getting rid of all those heavy chunk shots and thin shots, and then I'm delivering the hit. So it's like weight goes left, then I deliver the hit. That gets your strike in front of the ball every single time. And you'll notice that when you're watching video of my swing, I definitely get the majority of that pressure in my left foot before I swing down. Now finally, there's a drill that you can do without any of these boards, and you can do all those without a board too, just feeling that in your feet. That just makes it a better visual for a video. But I want to do a little heel lift drill. So what I'm going to do is in my backswing, I'm going to lift my heel up, my left heel about an inch. That ensures that my weight is getting to the right. Then I want to press that heel into the ground and then hit the golf ball. Now in my real swing, I actually do that. When I'm hitting a driver, I lift my left heel and then I plant my left heel and swing through. So if you're watching a driver swing of mine, you'll see that early in the backswing, my toe lifts up, my weight goes right. As I complete the backswing, my heel is off the ground, and then I put that heel back down, and that heel is down about halfway in my downswing. My weight is starting to get there. I press into the left side, and then I swing on through. So it's feeling like that teeter-totter. The teeter-totter goes right for your backswing, the teeter-totter shifts left, and then you start your downswing, and that can really help you to get the proper weight shift. All right, so if you want to be a consistent golfer, there's two things that have to happen. I'm going to get to the second one, which is a secret that most people don't realize is so closely related to this. But number one is I have to be able to hit the golf ball first and then come down and take a divot in front of the golf ball right here like I did on this mat. Now I'll get to later in this video why if you just do this one piece, if you just focus on hitting in front, you're probably going to hit some pretty bad shots. But I'll get to that here in a second. Let's first get the divot in front, and then let's add the secret piece that's going to tie it all together. So how do we get the divot in front? It comes down to your weight shift. What happens in a golf swing is my weight shifts to the right in the backswing, and then as I'm in my transition, my weight shifts to the left, and then I make my downswing. As I get my weight over my lead foot, I get my hands in front of the club head as I'm at impact, then I can hit the ball first and then come down and hit the ground. And if I can do that every single time, that's really half the battle. If you can do that with a nice straight shot shape or even a little bit of a draw, which we'll get to in the second half, that's the full picture. You're going to play some pretty daggone good golf if you can do nothing else but those two things. All right, so let's jump into progression here to teach us how to do this. Now here I have this divot board, the little yellow dot in the middle, we're going to pretend like that's the ball placement, and I'm going to put it in the middle of my stance when we're playing any iron off the ground basically. Now from there, I'm going to go ahead and shift my weight to my lead foot. I'm going to let my right foot drop back until it's about in line with the heel of my left foot, if I'm looking from down the line this way, and it's barely going to be resting on the ground. It may even be angled in this way and just kind of barely sitting on the ground, and my weight should feel like it's centered over the middle of my foot on my left foot. So I don't want to go way up on the toe this way. I don't want to go way back on the heel like this and the foot's rounding out. I just want to feel like I'm centered right through the center of my foot. That's going to make it almost impossible to do anything but make contact in front of this yellow dot. Now, as I make some swings here, you can see that right away my divot ends up being 2-3 inches in front of the golf ball, and it's almost impossible to do anything but that. Now, if you're not getting that divot in front, so if you're using this divot board and the marks end up doing something like this, even when you do this drill, and they end up at the golf ball or even behind the golf ball, that has to do with that right hand kind of pushing and flipping, trying to take over. Now, a lot of times that's in an effort to get more power, so training it to be leading in front sometimes doesn't feel as powerful, but when you see the ball fly, it actually goes a lot farther. So here's the solution to that. Same drill, middle of the stance with the golf ball. We drop a right foot back, weight centered over the left. Now take just the right hand only. And what I want you to focus on is a little bit of shaft lean. I want you to feel like if you have this divot board, you put the club head on the golf ball and you put the right hand all the way up here to where my hand would be over the front of this board. Now it's a little bit of an exaggeration, but I like to do that to start. And then from there, I'm simply going to rotate back, keeping that same angle in my wrist. So I have an angle in the back of my wrist. I keep that angle as I rotate back. As I rotate through, I feel like I keep that angle as I'm going through. Now when you start to swing with more speed, that angle will release after impact, which is totally fine, but you don't need to feel that. That'll happen all on its own as you add some swing speed. So here on the ball, hand in front, and then I feel like I'm rotating my body, keeping that angle the entire time. And you'll see right away, that just guarantees that you get that divot in front, probably 4 or 5 inches in front, which would be a bit to the extreme, but that's exactly how I want you to practice it. If we get too far in front, we can always move it back very, very easily. Now do a few swings like that, and then once you get comfortable, do it with both hands. Same angle on the right wrist, back and through, and repeat that until you get a good 15 or 20, making sure that you get the divot in front. Now what we're going to do is we're going to add the right foot, but with a small tweak. I'm going to take a golf ball, and as I set up to this, I'm going to put that golf ball on the outside of my right foot. So it almost, if this is my right foot on the ground, it kind of angles the foot in. I like to put it kind of on the ball of the foot up here so that it's easy to feel like you're going off that foot. And that's exactly what you should feel like in the swing. So as I set up to this board now, my foot angled in, my weight starts on my right side, but it helps me to push off that right side and get my weight balanced on my left, just like we worked on. And when you put that together with the wrist angle, again, the divot gets way in front. So don't be afraid to over-exaggerate that. I want you to use this board and feel like you keep all the divots. If you see these 2 yellow lines that are on there, keep all of the divots in front of those 2 yellow lines for now. And as we start to add some speed, you'll see right away that that'll start to move back. Now, here's the deal. This is not going to work. You're going to hit terrible shots if that's all you do. And the reason is that most players are already a little bit steep in their downswing, meaning that the shaft is too vertical, and they're already swinging a little bit too far to the left with your path. Most players don't overdraw the golf ball. If you already overdraw it, you're one of the rare few that overdraws the golf ball every time. You probably don't have to make this adjustment, but I bet if you're watching this, that's probably not you. You probably don't hit a 15 or 20 yard draw every single time. So what ends up happening is if I'm already a little steep, if I'm already swinging a little bit too much to the left, getting my weight more left and feeling like I hit down more gets me even steeper and more over the top, and I end up hitting this big banana slice. So that would look something like this. If I'm already a little bit steep, I'm setting my weight to the left, I'm getting my weight shift in that divot in front like we just worked on, and all of a sudden I slice across it, that ball bleeds off to the right, doesn't go very far. And if you look at this divot board again, it gives you instant feedback. Notice how the angle of the divot is going to the left. If I would put my club down the direction that this is traced, you'll see that my path is going this direction. So what we need to do is get the path more to the right, and that's when you can start to hit some really great shots. So we got to hit the divot in front like I did there, but we got to get the path a little bit more to the right. Now the secret to this is in the hips. Most people try to swing the club head or swing their arms more to the right, but if your hips are in the way, it's never going to happen. So here's what I mean by that. If I set up to this divot board and all of a sudden my hips are bumped like this, or my spine angle is kind of leaning this direction, if I try to swing to the right, so it's almost like a little reverse pivot here. If I get this way, if I try to swing out to the right with my hands and arms, there's no chance because my hips are in the way. I'd have to hit myself in the right hip. Here's the secret to it. You want to feel like your hips are bumped toward the target and almost a little bit closed. So if I put a club on my belt buckle here, I would have my belt or my hips pointing a little bit more toward the right, like almost the right side of the green or the right side of the fairway. You'll notice how that almost presets my head a little back behind the golf ball, and it starts to clear out a bunch of room in here to where I can swing inside out. Now if you pair that with the drills that we just worked on, it's easy to get the divot in front and get that path inside out. So if I do that, I'm going to go ahead and bump my hips, close them a little bit. I got a lot of space in here, and again I'm going to get my weight to the left, swing out to the right, and now all of a sudden I exaggerated there for the camera, but you can see the path of the divot was inside out. It wasn't chopping down over and across. So I'd like for you again, do a handful of reps like that until you get the feel of exaggerating it, and then you can tone it down. Now you don't have to have one of these divot board training aids to make this work. If you just pay attention to your divots, mark where your golf ball is. If you're outside on grass, you can make that happen. I love this one because you can sit right in your living room and get better at these things that we're talking about. Now I'll put a link down below this video in the description or lower on this page, and if you want to click that link, you get a special price on this divot board, and it also helps to support the channel. They give us a few bucks for every one they sell, and Bo Longo, the owner of these divot boards, just a super nice guy, world-class professional person, does a bang-up job, so it helps him, helps us to create more great videos here, and it's going to help your golf game because it gives you that instant feedback. But again, you don't have to have this. You're just going to improve faster if you do have one of these. Now there's still one final piece to this. You see, most players, when they get their weight in front, they get that path out to the right. We're so used to standing up out of our posture and kind of throwing the club casting that we still don't hit that clean strike like we want. The final piece, the third piece to really get this unbelievable compression, unbelievably solid golf shots like you see with the pros, and just for them all to feel good, is having lag. So if I can get that swing from the inside and have a bunch of lag like this, then I can really compress the golf ball, have my hands in front, and it just feels easy. Now, when you stand up, it's almost impossible to get that lag. And that's why I developed a drill called the knuckle dragger that's the perfect antidote to this. I'm going to play a preview of that video here in a second. And if you want to watch the full thing, all you need to do is go ahead and click the card that pops up on your screen. If you don't see that card, just look down below in the description of this video, click the link there, and you'll get instant access to that knuckle dragger. Let's go and get started. Got an awesome video for you. This one is what I call knuckle dragger. And this is one of the best ones, one of the big missing pieces to players that are struggling to get more lag. Now let's talk about when you lose lag, what's happening. A lot of times what's happening is as you make your downswing, if we're looking from this down the line view, what happens is my hips go toward the golf ball, they start to slide forward. My chest moves back away from this golf ball, so I'm getting farther away from the golf ball, and then all of a sudden I cast, I flip, and I don't have a lot of lag there. Well, look how far my hands are away from the ground. Also notice when I get my hands closer to the ground, so as my hands get lower, then what happens is they also go forward more. So as I want to have more lag, when you feel like your knuckles are dragging the ground, then that club is naturally going to lag back behind, and then you're going to release that out in front. When your hands are far away from the ground, well, if I had all that lag, where would I be swinging? I'd be swinging a foot over top of the golf ball. So you have to kind of flip, release that lag early to just make contact with the golf ball at all. So having those knuckles feeling like they're scraping the ground is really going to be a big key. Now another piece to this, again, when I talked about losing that posture, your hips go forward. You're going to want to feel like, as those hands scrape the ground, your knuckles drag the ground.